most of the food that people buy now is unrecognisable. It's all about growing healthy plants in healthy soil and having healthy animals and ultimately healthy people, and that's what it's all about.
I was wondering if you could give me a picture of your early life. Did you grow up here?
I did. I mean, I was born in the middle of the village here, and and I haven't really strayed very far. His grandfather was a farmer here, and all we ever wanted to do was be farmers. But so slightly tragically, but we went away to boarding school at the age of sort of 8, I think, which was weird. And so I spent the next 10 years or so kind of half here and half not here. I went off to university, read agriculture, and came back and been here ever since, really. Yeah.
You went with your brother to boarding school?
Yeah.
That must have been kind of like the two troops going to war, but was it strange leaving your family like that?
Well, no, oddly, when you're that age, you kind of accept stuff. At least we did. And I mean, it was odd. Yeah, I mean, it's boarding schools are odd places. But I think it also it turns you into a slightly different person. In the sense you learn not to have emotions, or to not show your emotions too much. Because you haven't got your mummy to go and cry to. So it's like it's a strange thing, and it's a strange English thing to do. And it's when we had an empire, you had to have a whole lot of people who were good at controlling their emotions, who could be sent off to run India or something. It's just kind of, and that no longer exists, and yet the boarding schools still do.
Yeah, you're right. It is a very English thing, weirdly, isn't it?
Yeah.
Does it happen elsewhere? I don't know.
A little bit.
It seems like a very...
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's certainly quite a few foreign kids there whose parents have obviously thought, the English public school system's brilliant, and so you're not only you're away from home, you're in a completely different country.
That's another step
weird,
above, isn't it? So 10 years there.
10 years there. Yeah.
You think you came out of the positive side of that group then with a sort of reinforced mindset and some confidence behind you?
Well, I think that's probably what it's all about. And I wasn't any good at it. I spent most of my time staring out of the window. I think, there were two very good schools I went to, in terms of academic results and things, and I came out with pretty good academic results, but not, but I learned early on not to push myself too hard, because I thought, well, I'm going to be a farmer, I don't really need A-levels, it's like but I wanted to get a good enough A-level so I could go to university and read agriculture. So, I was kind of slightly lazy in sense of only worked as hard as I needed to, or unless something interested me. They're quite good for giving room for your imagination, because I think imagination is quite important for kids, and I think modern schools are a little bit rubbish at saying this is what you've got to learn, and they're just... Children are pushed into more and more classes, more and more exams, and they're on a kind of conveyor belt. But actually, we sometimes need to stand back and take a break and think, hang on, what are we doing here? Or to actually use our minds to think rather than be told what to think. So yeah, it's that I think is the happy legacy of my strange boarding school life.
Yeah, I agree. Well, maybe we may have moved away from that for the worse then, in some senses.
I think we have, and I think it's a funny thing.
Did you ever have a careers advisor?
I don't remember anything about it really. We had because I just told them what I wanted to do, and I think they rather lost interest after that.
They said, yes, John.
Yeah, fair enough. You can't be a farmer unless you've got a farm. I think, good chance I'll get hold of a farm.
So even from young there, you were fairly destined for your career.
My granddad had 4 daughters, and he was quite old-fashioned, and it didn't occur to him that a girl could run a farm, and all he really wanted was a son, and I was the first grandson to come along, so he sort of picked me up and took me out. That worked well, yeah. And it's my father was an architect, and which is a completely different life, and it didn't really appeal I didn't compete with farming. So,
was there? Did you feel like a burden of, with the idea of being the eldest son or the first son? Did you feel a pressure to take on the farm?
No, none at all. And well, a little bit. Probably Grandad probably would have been keen, but I mean, yeah, everyone else luckily said, do whatever you want. But it was never, I sort of idolised my granddad. It was like, if you kind of want to be a farmer, you want to be a farmer.
Yeah, yeah.
There's nothing going to compete, and it's the best way of life. Not regretted it for a second. Yeah,
I agree. It's a way of life different to anything else, I think, for a number of factors.
Well, that's it. And it's a multidisciplinary. You end up being a jack of all trades and master of none if you're not careful. Which is, it's something that's bothered because we're not terribly good at doing lots of things.
I think actually that quote finishes with "but better than a master of one," which is interesting because I think perhaps that's applicable for farmers because you feel like you're everywhere.
Yeah.
But overall, you're bringing the whole thing up slowly, and you're perhaps better than just narrowing down on one subject. Yeah, better than a jack of all trades, master of none, but better than a master of one.
It's very. That makes much more sense. I feel a lot happier about that.
I think you can quote me on that. I'll have to Google.
Well, I mean, you've quoted it now, so it's
a
true.
Thing now.
It's a thing. Yeah. It's a thing. But I mean, I get so exasperated by so friends who are scientific, but they have an incredible tunnel vision, but they know everything there is to know about a particular, fungal disease of oilseed rape or something, and it's and say, no, you should do this as to try and control the sclerotinia or whatever it is, and well, actually, there's so many other factors at play, and it's like everything is so much more complex than we've ever given it credit for.
Certainly in a farming and food production space as well. Yeah. Do you think where do you think we might have gone wrong in that respect in the last, whatever you've seen, 50 years or whatever?
Yeah, probably 50 years. Most of the problems are the other side of the farm gate. We are living in we're the whole sort of commodity food thing is unfortunate, and most of the food that people buy now is unrecognisable as food. It's manufactured in factories, and the proportion of the money you buy a ready meal, it's whatever it is, a couple of quid, and probably sort of 4 pence of that comes back as value to the farmer, and you think, well, it's we're all the time struggling to produce stuff as cheaply as possible, and it goes off in a lorry and we don't know where.
Yeah, and you wonder what for.
What for, exactly. And it's, we're being paid by the ton rather than by the quality of what we grow. We were, before we came here, looking at the guy cutting up one of our heifers next door, and it's meat that's been hung for 28 days, and it's kind of grass-fed heifer, and if you actually analyse the balance of amino acids and the fatty acid, omega-3 and the omega-6 and the conjugated linoleic acid, and it's all going to be a really lovely proportion. It'll taste absolutely delicious, and it'll be far better for you than something that's been grain-fed or hardly anybody gives a stuff. They just want an animal of a particular size.
Yes.
The abattoirs, they'll talk about the fat on it or whatever, and they're not bothered about what it's eaten or what its history is or what breed it is particularly, or they want something that's going to fit into their little plastic packets. And
at times I wish I had a nutrition degree so I could sort of explain that stuff with some backing behind me. But I sort of say it anecdotally to people I speak to now.
Well, I've just been reading a completely fascinating book by David Montgomery and Anne Bickley about called "What Your Food Ate." So saying how crucially important it is. Yeah. Well, what we put in our stomachs. We've got this fantastically complicated microbiome in our guts, and which has evolved over millions of years to eat, to process proper food.
Yeah.
And when you eat proper food, you know, whether it's a Inuit living in the Arctic or, you know, a Maasai living in the middle of Africa, you know, they'll have completely different diets, but, you know, very healthy, and they don't get diseases and they don't get ill, and they probably get killed by a lion or a walrus or something, you know, but we live in a society where we don't die of infectious diseases anymore, or very rarely, but we're dying of degenerative diseases, and, you know, there seems to be mounting evidence that the food we eat isn't good enough. You know,
yeah.
So it's like you know, it hasn't got the right quality, and there's plenty of it, but it's and you know, half the population's obese or whatever the figure is now, and it's you know, people are having to eat more and more to try and get the nutrients they need, and it's, you know, I think it's
yes, yeah, it's the same like you were saying with feeding beef animals what they naturally would eat or would want to eat, or what's beneficial for them, and then in passing it us for our health. It's the same with plants and vegetables and fruits, in the way that if I know it's a bit of a metaphorical way of speaking about it, but in the way that if a vegetable isn't eating the right nutrients from the soil, because the soil is absolutely dead. I saw some concerning statistic about an orange nowadays where I think it's got a third of the vitamin C that an orange, I don't know whether, I think it was based on an imported European orange, about a third of the vitamin C it had about 50 years ago or so, and that's just from the way the soil was just grown.
There's not enough in the ground. So you've got to eat 3 oranges today to get the same benefit.
Precisely.
Even if you've got the healthiest soil in the world, it's still beyond our control, just because odd things like the carbon dioxide levels in the air are twice what they were. And of course, carbon dioxide is the vital building block of all plants, you know. But so now plants haven't got to work so hard to get the carbon dioxide. They make more carbohydrates or whatever, and they're. But you know, the nutrient level is inevitably slightly less, you know, because
so there's a value. Yeah, there's a value to, be it plants or animals, them working harder to survive.
Yeah.
In the way that perhaps a grain-fed animal, it's too easy to put on
gets
fat.
A bit lazy.
Gets lazy. Eat hard-working animals. I think.
They've got to go at that. Yeah. And it's yes, that's probably a lot of it. And it's all our animals they don't get any grain at all. And I remember reading the old farming books in when I was at university, because I was kind of dismayed by what we were being taught. You know, it seemed to be too kind of industrial in its outlook. And they used to, you know, they sort of said that, you know, you talk old Newman Turner and people, and he would go off and buy animals with Johannes disease or Bruce TB. You used to be able to buy, you know, really sick animals at market. You'd struggle to sell them nowadays, but anyway, he'd buy them and take them home and put them on his herbal lays, and they'd recover. And I remember reading this, thinking, whatever, you know, I just didn't believe it. But you know, having gone away from you know, feeding hard food and having fast-growing animals to having more naturally growing animals, growing at the right speed and eating, giving them much more choice about what to eat. And in a herbal lay, you've got some 19 different varieties of grass or clovers and chicory and all sorts of other things, and and you can see the animals each day they're all eating different things, but they're terribly healthy. You know, and then the vet is a bit of a stranger to us now. You know,
that's good.
We only need to call them up if something goes badly wrong, like we forget to castrate one or something. You know, it's like, or you know, we have to have a TB test or whatever it is.
Yes.
But I mean, there's no routine medicine required because they're healthy animals, and that's obviously a saving, but it's also, you know, I think it reflects that it must help with the sort of taste and the quality of the meat you're getting at the other end, because you're not and as you say, plants are the same. You know, plant grown in healthy soil. You know, this was the organic thing, you know, when you know, attracted me to organic farming again, you know, reading Lady Eve Balfour and things at university, and it's all about growing healthy plants in healthy soil and having healthy animals and ultimately healthy people, and that's what it's all about. And and that's kind of fallen by the wayside. Organic's kind of slightly gone, sort of obsessing about, you know, it's a lot of you cannot do this now, rather than actually, if you do this, everyone will be better off. And there's a lot of thou shalt not use.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the noise from the organic industry is kind of so it's so regimented and so strict. Some people have almost lost the idea of what they're trying for in the first place.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's exactly. And you know, talking to people who buy organic, I like organic because it hasn't got any sprays on it. You know, no, well, that's kind of the least interesting thing about it. You know, but then you realise, it'll take me about 3 quarters of an hour to explain. It's the other thing. So it's probably, I can see why they've kind of focused on that, but it's not. It's unfortunate anyway. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious, what else from your formal education did you see a disparity between your common sense or what you were seeing on growing up on a farm, and what differences were there that didn't make sense to you?
I was interested in organic at university, but as soon as I came home, I abandoned any thought of doing it because it just looked far too difficult, because no one else was doing it. There was no support, really. And everyone's saying, you know, it's much easier to spray, and then you get much more yield. And this was the 1980s, and, you know, the first... it was just money for old rope farming, you know, that's everything kind of had come together before, and the problems hadn't sort of, you know, black grass hadn't sort of taken over the world, and yields were going up year on year, and there was just, you could use any chemical you liked, and there was no kind of, why any of us are still alive, you know, the way we carried on was just tipping stuff into the sprayer, and there were no cabs on the tractors, and bouncing along with fumes everywhere and things. It's
looking back to those early days that you spoke about, what would be, if you could summarise it, what would be a message you'd sort of tell yourself back then?
Be a bit braver, I think. I think it's a funny thing, you know, people talk about the farming community, and I've only been to one NFU meeting in my life, and I got into a bit of an argument with someone about nitrogen fertiliser, and never went back. And but you know, obviously we know a lot of farmers around here, but there's quite a lot of peer pressure to kind of toe the line, I think, and certainly felt like I didn't want to rock the boat by doing anything too wacky. You know, I just wanted to do what everyone else was doing.
Yeah.
And I've always assumed everyone else knows what they're doing, and I'm the only one who doesn't.
Well, it's like a self-doubt in all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
You question
sort
whether...
of imposter syndrome. You think, oh Christ, if they'll find out I don't know anything. You know?
You'll be found out publicly.
You'll be rumbled.
Publicly shamed in the streets.
Yeah. Your farm will be taken away by the War Ag Committee.
Yeah, for not farming, like how everybody else is.
You're not a proper farmer. Yeah.
Do you think that was in the early days of making a change, perhaps, in your business? Is that something that was just in your mind, or did you really feel a real palpable kind of resistance from anyone around you? Neighbours, farmers, friends, family even?
I don't know. I mean, I got increasingly worried that, you know, that the system we'd adopted, you know, it was all, you know, we tried a bit of direct drilling in the 80s and things, because it was, you could burn stubble then, and you know, after you burnt stubble, you're too young to remember. I mean, it was great fun burning stubble, you know, but his granddad loved it. He was a pyromaniac. And you know, half the hedges on the farm burnt and disappeared. And it was kind of ghastly, you know, and you see the hairs running around. It was terrifying. But after it had gone, you got a clean burn, whatever weed seeds would survive that would chit immediately, and the soil, the top of the soil was friable. So you could get a little bit in some direct drill and just cut into that and spray paraquat, you know, gramoxone, to kill the little weeds that came up. And it was, you know, really low-cost, fabulous system. And then they banned straw burning, and everyone said, oh, well, you know, we'll have to go back to ploughing. And so everyone else said, we'll go back to ploughing. So we went back to ploughing. And so you'd plough the straw in after harvest, chop straw, and come next year, you'd plough, and then all the straw would come back up again. It had been lying there, so not rot. You know, you sort of think, hang on, actually, you know, something's, you know, our soils aren't really working very well, you know. And it's, but, you know, everyone else was doing it, so it must be all right.
What were the biggest things that made you think, let's make a change, let's really just push the boat out and change it?
Well, I suppose we weren't really we weren't. I mean, we're on so funny ground here. It's nice soil, but it was going a bit horrible, and you'd plough it up and you'd get kind of what we call horses' heads of lumps of clay, and if you didn't come straight in, you had to get your timings so spot on and come in with a set of discs or something. You had a dreadful little set of Parmeter discs. All the bearings were kind of squeaking and things, but you could kind of slice it up into nice little bits, and then you inevitably ended up sitting on a power harrow and sort of clouds of dust, and then I think it's a hell of a lot of work, a lot of diesel, a lot of rubber tyres burning off, and a lot of metal, and we weren't getting particularly good yields. Some years everything would go spot on, but if the climate wasn't with you, it'd be a little bit rubbish, and timing was crucial, and we were all not really quite on it. And then, Steve Townsend came around. He was promoting minimum tillage, and and it kind of made perfect sense. We went around to look at farmers who were only sort of, they left the straw on the top and they incorporated it in the top few inches, and suddenly a worm population exploded, and by next harvest, all the straw had gone, and the top of the soil was much nicer because of all the organic matter you'd incorporated. We weren't burying it, so that was a really happy moment. So we carried on doing that for a bit. We sold the plough, got a decent set of discs, and we're going. And then Steve came and said, "No, you're going too deep," so we had to keep going shallower and shallower. And then someone said, "Well, what you could do is." Just not disc it at all, just leave the straw on the top and cut the seed in. And realistically, we tried that, and you've got all that straw, it's not going to work. And then the internet came along, I suppose. I suppose it was the farming forum on the internet, or the British Farming Forum as it then was a complete eye-opener, because you could see people talking about their different systems. And then something called the No-Till Alliance came along off the
that sounds quite militant, that does.
Well, there was a bunch of guys, Jim Bullock and Will Scale and people, and they organised open days on people's farms, and so you could go along, and it was a kind of light bulb moment of thinking, oh bloody hell, it's not a wacky thing. It's an act. These guys are proper farmers, and they've worked it out, and they're collaborating, they're sharing ideas with each other, and saying this is what worked for us, and we tried that, it didn't work, but it might work in your part of the country, or on your soil, or whatever. It was just so nice to be chatting to other farmers rather than people who were trying to sell you something, because most of our advice would come from the agronomist or the fertilizer salesman or tractor. So,
it's strange, isn't it? I've never quite understood that, the agronomist that works for a chemical company.
Yeah.
I know they're qualified, but come on.
It's a strange model. I mean, it would be illegal in France to do that. And you think, well, yeah, quite right. All your advice is coming from a bloke who makes a profit from every litre of stuff he sells you.
If I was I'd be pushing it down the throats if I was there. Certainly. And
shortly after we went down this road, I had to, because our agronomist kept sending us insecticide. I said, look. I want to stop using it. Oh no, but I think
you really need
it'd be worth it, because it's so cheap. It's really, and you just might get an aphid that might have a bit of BYDV or something.
And it would fix that.
I couldn't really give a flick. It's like anyway. And so we found another agronomist who was on side, and made life a lot easier. But it's it's a strange model, and farmers love tractors and things, so it's quite fun buying all these tractors. But I mean, the first thing we did is get rid of our big tractors. Suddenly it didn't need it. It didn't need half a kit. We sell all the.
That's a fascinating realization, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just.
Do you think people, maybe farmers, maybe people in big businesses, small businesses at all, do you think they're addicted to things like that? Maybe not size, but the idea of being in a bigger way, in a bigger operation.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, the trouble with farms, it's. I was talking to someone the other day. He said he got all these buildings on his farm. It's just full. It used to be full of machines, because your dad had bought it, saying, well, it might come in handy. You don't get rid of it.
God,
it's like
that's the chronic condition of a farmer. That is.
And then. And the barns didn't have any other value, but suddenly now, you can rent out barns to anybody, so it's, so people have kind of emptied them all out of all these antique bits of kit, and you get a surprising amount of money for old tractors and things. You know,
and you wonder why you didn't.
Exactly. Cash in, and
is that something you thought?
Them, and all our costs went down so much, and we got a lot of flack. You know, people said, "Oh, it's not proper farming," or it's kind of, "Oh, it won't last." You know, and it's a.
Who was giving you that flack?
Neighbouring farmers or people in the area, or and also. Well, agronomists and people, you know, I mean, there's people who felt so directly threatened by what we were doing. Yeah, it was a visit to Tony Reynolds' farm that sort of changed my mind, and then we went to see Simon Cowell on the Essex coast, and he's on sort of pure clay, and he's doing extraordinary things, and I thought, well, you know, if they can do it, we sure as hell we can. So we bought a John Deere 750A drill and just did the whole farm, and everything grew, and it just looked fantastic. And then the next year the same. And then you realise it's not that straightforward. You know, you've got to look after your soil, and you've got to be. You know, it's much easier to control the weeds if everything's on the surface, and so you don't want to disturb it at all because you bury the seeds and they come up late. But you know, there's ways of doing it. But your soil can go a bit sad, so you want to grow things like cover crops and. You know, it's more complicated. But anyway, we were 3 or 4 or 5 years into being 100% no-till, and an Australian bloke came by called No-Till Bill from Western Australia, and he'd been over for cereals, I think, and he'd been to cereals, and he'd said there's nothing about no-till at cereals, you know. And he's a strange bloke, No-Till Bill. He's Bill Crabtree, lovely bloke. And he's an advisor, and I think he farms a bit himself, but he got kind of 90% of the farmers in Western Australia no-till farming. You know, he sort of almost single-handedly, but not quite. Obviously, you know, he's a sort of extension officer, and just a complete enthusiast, and he talks pure farmer.
He was an inspiration.
What he was, he was. He said, you know, we were having a drink in the pub, and he said, you know, why is there no-till at cereal? I said, I don't know, you'll have to ask him. He said, okay. Then, and he got his phone out, and so he was looking up, okay, I've just sent him an email now, you know, so I thought, oh, all right. And then I saw him a bit later, and he said, no, they said there's not enough demand for it. And anyway, he disappeared off. But the idea sort of lingered in my head, okay, well, if cereals aren't going to do it, we should do our own show. And I thought, oh, we can't do that. And then it just... we went off to America, my wife and I, to No-Till on the Plains. There's a big no-till show in Salina, Kansas, and it was completely fantastic. You know, it was just extraordinary. And they had such unbelievably good speakers. Americans are very good speakers. I think they teach speaking at school. You know, it's just they do rhetoric. And the farmers who stood up, and you know, and Jill Clapperton was there, and various other kind of scientists who all just explained how the soil worked. And I thought, well, you know, why has no one told me about it? I went and did 3 years at university, and there was nothing basically about soil beyond it's a mixture of sand, silt and clay and a bit of organic matter, and don't, you know, look after it if you can. You know, it's like anyway, and I look around, and there's 1,200 farmers in Stetsons lapping it up and taking notes. So I think, you know, these guys are interested. You know, surely English farmers are going to be interested. Surely. And so my wife and I was sort of saying, oh, you know, someone really ought to do it in England. Eventually, it became apparent that we were actually ideally placed to do it because, apart from us, we were suddenly, having been very busy because we used to spend all our time sitting on tractors, with bloody power harrow on the back, and trying to beat ourselves into submission. And now you had harvest, you perhaps planted a cover crop or two, and then you kind of twiddled your thumb and wondered what the noise was of all your neighbours' tractors working, and you know, were we missing something? And then, you know, we had time on our hands, so we thought, okay, let's do it. And so that's how Groundswell started, really. Yeah. And it was, you know, the original one was just getting a bunch of all the different drills in the field at the same time, and we planted a cover crop and say, okay, your job is to, you've got a patch here, and we'll get a bunch of farmers along, and they'll all look at each different drill and see how they perform in direct sowing into a living cover crop.
Were you even anxious then at the start that people wouldn't come?
No, I was convinced they would. Just because I'd talked about it on the farming forum, and there was a lot of...
so you put the feelers out.
There was a lot of interest, and there are various people, because Clive Bailey up in Staffordshire, he'd done a kind of smaller one of getting a few drills into the field and said, people come and have a look at it. Well, I was thinking, well, actually, we can combine that idea with no-till on the plains, having some really good speakers explaining how it works, explaining how soil works. And
well, you were right in that respect, didn't you? People certainly showed up.
Well, they showed up. We had 450 people, I think, year one, and that exceeded our expectations. And
what's the number now?
I think we had 5,500 last year. It was over 2 days. The first year was 1 day, and then we started introducing, of course, because farming isn't all about tractors and things, and we realised we needed livestock on the farm, and so we started doing livestock talks as well. And
yes, 2023 is 7th year, 6th year,
probably so. It started 2016, then we missed one because of COVID.
Oh yes, yeah.
So I can't do the maths really, but it must be something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good going. What's been probably your proudest moment of the years so far?
I don't know. I mean, it's odd because it's really. I mean, we've had some fantastic speakers, and it's people coming up to me and saying, you don't know who I am, but I farm in whatever it was, and I came to Groundswell, 3 years ago, and it changed my life, whatever. It's just, and thank you so much. And there's a huge constituency of people out there who were really unhappy with the way they were farming, but they didn't know how to break out of it. And as I was saying earlier, I mean, we were the same here, sitting on our own little farm, and you get on well with all your neighbours, but they're all doing so vaguely, or they're pursuing a similar path, and just breaking out of that is quite hard. There's a lot of people, they go home, work on the farm, and Dad's saying, no, that's not going to work. This is how we do things, and it's kind of, you want to change things, and it's. Friends who only got hold of a checkbook at the age of 60, because Dad, was still kind of clutching onto it. And said,
it seems like the most damaging expression, I think, is we've always done it this way.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, we might get a bit further if we don't.
Yeah, it's worked very well up to now. Yeah.
That must be incredibly fulfilling, like you said, to have people say.
Well, it really is, because actually that's kind of why we did it. Because there was no encouragement to do this, and unless you actively went out and looked. I mean, I was lucky to sort of stumble across it on the Farmers Forum, but it's, nowadays there's a lot of chat on Twitter and things. I don't really engage with any of it now, but I still look at the Farmers Forum, but it's not.
Yes.
But it's. The Farmers Weekly and the Farmers Guardian, bless them, they didn't really cover it at all. The first Groundswell we got a couple little mentions, or the journalists are really enthusiastic. The big business that behind, they don't really like it, because all our adverts, you look at Farmers Weekly, it's this exciting new spray, or this fantastic fertiliser, or look at this huge tractor, or this massive great bit of cultivation equipment. They don't want to have an article saying you don't need any of that next door to it, because it's... so they covered it, but only... anyway, so we wanted to kind of... It was our opportunity to do something from the farmers' point of view, so say, look, we're farmers and this worked for us, and just get a whole lot of farmers in the barn, and actually, you can have as many great speakers as you like, or demonstrations, and most of the great things about Groundswell happen in the bar or in the queue for a sausage. It's just
as all great things do.
It's just a random conversations, because it's because a lot of people come along saying, and you can sort of see their body language is, there's a bunch of hippies,
right,
and actually then to talk to another bloke who happens to be a farmer who's and say, yeah, well, this is what we do. And it's just, those are the kind of light bulb moments, It's
I'm sure. Yes. I'm ashamed to say I haven't been in attendance yet, but Groundswell's been on my radar for several years, and I seem to have managed to be away for about 3 years now, including COVID. But I'll certainly be there in June. I can tell you that much. Is that the future? What's the long-term plan?
I really don't know. I mean, it's kind of, let's see what happens. We're going to do a little one in Scotland this year, but just a kind of talking one rather than there won't be a demos. But just a one-day chatty one up there and see how it goes.
I see.
Because I think it's and we were lucky. We had Gabe Brown was over last autumn, and he came along and did a one-day thing with two of his mates from Understanding Agriculture, and he's such a sort of legend. It's so nice to.
Yeah, I've read his book.
I've read his book.
That's all I know about him.
He is. I mean, it was we years ago we were flown out. ASDA took a bunch of us to 30 farmers from all over the country, and not quite sure why, they took me, but it's very nice they did, and this was before Groundswell and things. They took us around the whole of the exciting, Joel Salatin, Gabe Brown, and Jay Fuhrer, all these kind of legends.
Heavy hitters, yeah.
And so I'm saying, why are ASDA doing this? And the bloke said, well, I think they're worried that if farming doesn't change, we won't have any food to sell in 30 or 40 years. So we're taking some farmers over to look at what we see the future as. And all the guys we were seeing said, don't sell to supermarkets,
Right.
They were, the first thing they said, I think, has to have really thought this through.
Don't say it.
But it was, because Gabe and everyone, they sell nearly everything direct.
Direct, yeah.
In fact, we bumped into Gabe at the first no-till on the plains we went to, and he said to me then, and it took a while for it to sink in, but it was like, people go on about sustainability, but he said our whole system is screwed, and there's no point sustaining something which isn't really working very well, and we need to regenerate it, and regenerate, but it's and then but it's sort of bubbled, and so actually sustainability is fine if you're starting on a high
at
a level where you're happy to sustain it. But if you're down here, you want to get up there, you want to regenerate your thing, you want to make things.
It is interesting, the terminology. It's even the word regenerative when it comes to agriculture. I think people get a bit lost about whether
it really annoys people, and I don't understand why it's so angry making.
Yes,
but it's a slightly kind of, it's sustainability used to. My father hated sustainability. He said, it's just so annoying. It's just one of those weasel words. And I think, well, no, it just means you can carry on doing exactly
what you're doing. And I've always looked at that especially in agriculture. A sustainable business is sustainable for the bank account, for people's health, for maybe the land, But you say the word sustainable and people think you've got to plant 1,000 trees and just call it a day.
No, exactly, because we were so unsustainable the way we were carrying on. We were using up our soil, and it was getting worse and worse every year, and so you can't. You can't carry on like that, because people have 60 harvests left or 50 harvests or whatever it is, and
they came out with that number, didn't they?
And it was they've kind of dropped it a bit now. But the pleasing thing we've discovered is, in the 12 years we've been doing this, our soils are transformed. It's extraordinary. We haven't disturbed them at all, really, for 12 years, but. We used to have a kind of layer of topsoil which was slightly different colour from the clay underneath. Yes, and now we've got a deep layer of dark and rich soil with a lovely structure and worms going, and all these living. You think, well,
it is a fascinating thing.
And we were always told, it takes 1,000 years to make a centimetre of soil. Absolute bollocks. You can grow it really quite quickly if you.
It is, it's a fascinating thing. And when you lean into it, as you have, into the whole topic and the health of soil, curious, do you ever find yourself walking across a field and just looking down or just kicking the things? I find I'm doing that. And I think people must think I'm mad. I'm not looking at the nice hedges.
Oh, no, I know.
I'm kind of digging my heel in sometimes, and I'm walking around with a spade like a madman.
Well, it is. I mean, it's so pleasing. I mean, it's endlessly fascinating too. And you get odd patches where things are just growing a lot better. You think, what the hell's happened here? You know, it's like, or patches where nothing, you know, and you sort of dig little holes and you're trying to work out. You know, there's I mean, it's, you get, as you say, you get a crick in it because you always,
you do look down,
You're looking down,
That's right. Looking down, it's ironic, isn't it? You're looking up in some ways, you're looking forward. But
but it's you know, it's.
What do you think, bearing that in mind, what do you think holds most people back from changing?
There's certainly a lot of peer pressure. I was talking to a young farmer friend the other day, and he's saying, you know, his dad and all his mates, they're just, you know, they regard it as a real threat to their way of life. And you think, well, it's completely the opposite of that, but it's just you know, but there is that kind of feeling that, you know, the forces of reaction are planting, you know, false stories about what it's actually all about, just to try and, you know, because I think, I mean, a lot of people whose incomes are seriously threatened by this. I was saying about the, you know, adverts in the farming papers, but it's but there's, you know, it's still, as you say, the agronomists coming around and the, you know, the machinery salespeople, and they're, you know, we're going to need them less and less, you know. So it's like, so they, you know, they fight back in whatever way. And
do you find it hard now, knowing what you know or having done what you've done, to keep a sense of empathy for people that are early on the journey or haven't started a journey?
It's easy to forget, you know, what it was like back then, but I remember it quite kind of clearly, and but I've never really had a problem with I quite like change. I quite like the radical.
Enjoy the chaos.
Well, a little okay, but also just, you know. But I understand a lot of people don't like change, you know, and a lot of farmers certainly. I mean, if you know, because farming is such a slow process, you know. You know, sort of looking at the cows and they're young, they're 2 years old or whatever. If you want to change how you do things, you've got to think sort of 5 years ahead or whatever, you know, what bull you want or whatever, and then you put a bull in, and 9 months later you'll have a calf, and then, you know, it'll take, you know, there's a huge kind of lead-in time, or, you know, you want them to eat this thing, you've got to think about ordering the seed now, but you won't start grazing it till this time next year or whatever, you know. It's like
it is slow.
It's,
Equally, I wonder if does that swing both ways? Because earlier we mentioned how there was some sort of figure dreamt up about 50 harvests left at the current rate of soil degradation, whatever it is. You'd think that would put a sense of urgency in people's mind. Yeah,
well, I think you tend to shut off from that because it's too scary. Also, 50 years is, you know, for most farmers, because I'm the average age of a farmer and I'm over 60. You know, so 50 years is kind of, who cares?
Yeah,
you know?
right.
We're going to be buried, so, you know, long before then. But, I mean, it's like climate change. It's like soil degradation. It happens so slowly, you kind of get used to it.